Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a few minutes to react to this clip of Melanie Phillips that I think is really important. If you don't know who Melanie Phillips is, she's a British journalist and author, one of the clearest thinkers in the world on the intersection of Islam, the West, and Israel, something that I talk about a lot. And what she says here is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I both want to affirm what she's saying, and I also want to take it one step further, because I think that she's identified something very real and very important. She expresses it very clearly, but I think that there's also a deeper explanation that she doesn't quite get to. There's another layer that she doesn't get to. And that deeper explanation is what I want to talk about today in this video. So let's get to Melanie Phillips. And here is the clip.
The Western liberal mind conceives of itself as being good because it's liberal. The Western liberal tells him or herself, I'm a good person because I'm liberal, or I'm liberal because I'm a good person, which means that I believe in things like the brotherhood of man, conscience and compassion, looking after the wretched of the world, the poor, the wretched of the world, standing up against abuses of power. These are all good things, and that's why I'm a liberal. And I'm a liberal because of all these good things. So one of the expressions of my goodness and my liberalism is that I support the Palestinian Arabs, who I think are an oppressed people, and they are oppressed by the Israelis, who have taken their land away from them, and they are oppressing them. Now, every part of that, in my view, is a lie. But put that to one side. This is what the liberal progressive thinks. And the liberal progressive thinks that supporting the Palestinians is therefore something that makes the liberal progressive a good person. October 7 happened. And suddenly you have a situation in which the people that the liberal progressive has supported as being oppressed, and everything they do is a legitimate defense or resistance against oppression, suddenly we can see that those people have turned into the most bloodthirsty savages that could ever be imagined. Not just people who kill, but who slaughter in a sadistic, barbaric, debauched and depraved fashion that people can't imagine ever happening. They have slaughtered, raped, beheaded, tortured, burned alive babies, children, women, elderly men, and others, and in which the people that they've supported as being oppressed and good people because they're victims are these savages. And the people they have represented as oppressors are the victims. They can't have that. Because if they have that, if they admit that that is the case, then their entire worldview is shattered, because the people, the cause they have supported as representing goodness is shown to be evil. And what does that make them? It makes them evil. So they can't have it. So what do? They go to extraordinary lengths to pretend that black is white, that justice is injustice, that oppression is resistance, and vice versa. So they have to represent the Israelis as being at fault. The Israelis are to blame for what's happened. So there is no better way of blaming people than accusing them of the very thing they are the victim of. Projection. So you accuse them of genocide. We hear it also regularly. The Israelis are accused of being Nazis. It's the same thing. It's not simply an offensive thing. It's a very deliberate thing, because if the Israelis are Nazis, then we are free. We, the liberal West, are free of any kind of guilt or any kind of association with bad things, because they are to blame. They are the people who are bad. And so we are free to continue with our fantasies of us being good people. And I think that's also what lay behind these amazing scenes that we saw on social media of people with their hands tearing down the posters of hostages. Now you have to ask yourself, what's going through the mind of someone like that? These weren't posters advertising Israel. They weren't advertising the Israeli Defense Forces. They were pictures of babies, of children, of women who had been kidnapped by bloodthirsty monsters, by savage, depraved savages, and were being almost certainly subjected to untold horrors. And yet they were torn down, and the faces of the people tearing them down were contorted very often with rage and hate. And you have to ask yourself, what's going on in the mind of that person? And it seemed to me that they had to literally with their fingernails tear it out of sight. It was something that could not be tolerated to be in existence at all. The very concept of the Israeli babies and children as victims of the people they had been supporting, because it contradicted the narrative on which they had hung their own moral worth. And it seemed to me also they were tearing the Jews out, trying to tear the Jewish people completely out of their world, out of their sight, out of their world, out of their minds, out of their thoughts, and out of their consciences. That's to me what it represented. And this whole inversion of genocide thing is part of that. It is not just disgusting. It is not just ridiculous. It's evil. And I think it is a symptom of the evil paths into which the West has fallen through its embrace of a whole range of ideologies, a whole range of thinking, which I think has come to define what we call the liberal progressive West.
Okay. There we are. So what Melanie Phillips is describing is something that I think all of us have felt since October 7th, but haven't been able to fully articulate. She's saying that the Western liberal progressive, whatever you want to call them, didn't react the way they did despite their values, right? They reacted the way they did because of their values, right? Everything disturbing that we've seen from the left, it's not a deviation from their liberal progressive values. Their entire moral identity is built on a framework of oppressor and oppressed. And in that framework, the Palestinians are the oppressed, Israel's the oppressor. And when October 7th happened, the way she explained it, right? When the people they had defined as the oppressed revealed themselves to be monsters, to be capable of the most savage atrocities imaginable, to carry them out, they couldn't accept it because accepting it would shatter everything. And she's right. She's absolutely right about everything she said. But here's where I want to take it further. Before we go on, please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel if you hadn't yet. And go back into the archive. There's a lot of videos on this topic that aren't tied to the headlines. Very important. Actually, working on some writings on these issues. And also, please make sure that you're subscribed to the Israel 365 news channel. And in the description of this video, you'll find subscription information for our newsletters. So here's where I want to take this further. Because Melanie Phillips is giving us the psychology behind it, getting into the head of the person tearing down the sign, the picture of the hostage. She's explaining what's happening in the minds of these people. And that's very valuable. But what I want to know, and what I think you want to know, is where does this psychology, she's unpacked the psychology, but where does it come from? It's not just an emotional reaction. This is a trained response. This is what happens when you've been educated in a very specific ideological framework, and that framework has a name and a history. The oppressor-oppressed framework, that binary that Melanie Phillips is describing, the idea that the world is divided between those who dominate and those who are dominated, the idea that there's some moral worth, there's value that comes from siding with those who are being dominated, those who are being oppressed. This is not a new idea. It's a specifically Marxist idea. It goes back over a century, and it was systematically introduced into Western universities, into Western media, into Western culture. It didn't get there by accident. And here's where it gets really interesting, because most people think, when they think about this, they say, okay, so these are progressive leftists. They've been educated in Marxist ideas, fine. But what does that have to do with their support for Hamas? Why are they supporting Hamas because of their Marxism? Hamas is an Islamist organization. It's a Sunni fanatic religious organization. It wants to establish a Sharia state. It throws gay people off rooftops. It does untold atrocities to women, their own women. Everything about Hamas is on the surface the opposite of what a progressive is supposed to believe in. And yet they support Hamas, right? The red, green alliance. These leftists support Hamas. And people look at this and they say, well, these people are hypocrites. They make no sense. Gays for Palestine, ha ha ha. We laugh at them. We just think that they're fools, useful idiots. These are the types of things we say about them. We point out the inconsistency. We think that they don't realize what they're supporting. Don't you realize that if you, a gay person or some purple-haired progressive atheist, were in Gaza, they would kill you? We talk about them as though they are fools, and there's some truth to that. But I think that explanation is too easy, and it distracts us, and it deflects. It makes us not really think about the internal logic of how they're thinking, because it's too pervasive and it's gone on far too long for it to just be stupidity or hypocrisy. If that's what it was, some sort of knee-jerk anti-Israel reaction after October 7th, it would have gone away. But it's not. It's a consistent alliance between these two ideologies. Now, what I think is actually happening is something much more significant. It gets to the heart of what I've been talking about on this channel for a long time. Let me finally get to the point. I know some people in the comments have said I take a while to get to the point. I'm sorry. Both the Marxist progressive worldview and the Islamist worldview share something fundamental. And it's not their politics. It's not their theology, although there's some commonality in their worldview. What they share is a common enemy. And the common enemy is what I like to call biblical civilization, the civilization built on the Bible, on the idea that human beings are created in the image of God, that they have individual moral agency, that authority is limited, that freedom is a God-given right given to every individual. That civilization, Jewish and Christian, is what both of these worldviews, both the leftist progressives, the Marxists, and the Muslims, are opposed to at the deepest level. Think about it. Marxist regimes throughout history have always gone after biblical religion, Jews and Christians. The Soviet Union closed churches and synagogues. Communist China persecutes Christians to this day. Cuba, North Korea. North Korea is number one, meaning the worst country in the world to be a Christian. Christians get killed or imprisoned, for indefinitely. North Korea. So Cuba, North Korea, Eastern Europe under communism, everywhere Marxism takes hold, biblical religion, Christianity and Judaism, are suppressed. That's not because of a practical political calculation. It's not because of some alliance. It's because biblical faith, the idea that every human being stands before God as an individual, autonomous, moral agent, and that no human ruler on earth is above the law of God, those basic concepts of who the human being is in their standing before God, is structurally incompatible with a system that demands submission to a total authority. And Islamism, like Islam as a political ideology, the theology of it, it also sees biblical civilization as its primary civilizational opponent. There's a saying in the Middle East, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. This has been seen on spray painted on walls in Gaza and other places in the Middle East. It's a Muslim expression that refers to first the Jews, then the Christians. Our enemies see us as the same. They see Jews and Christians as two expressions of the same thing. A civilization built on the Bible, on human dignity, on limited power, and they oppose that civilization. So when Marxist progressives and Muslims find themselves on the same side, supporting Hamas, opposing Israel, tearing down hostage posters, it's not a coincidence. It's not hypocrisy. It's not a pragmatic marriage of convenience. It's a natural alliance between two worldviews that share a common target. Now, let me come back to the image that Melanie Phillips used, because I think it's one of the most powerful images from the post-October 7th period. This image of people tearing down posters of kidnapped hostages with rage on their faces. Melanie Phillips says they were trying to tear the Jewish victims out of their sight, out of their conscience, because those victims contradicted their narrative, the whole framework of their ethical, moral worldview. And yes, but think about what that means at a deeper level. The existence of Jewish victims, babies, elderly people, women taken hostage by an Islamic terror organization is intolerable to these people. It's not just inconvenient, it's intolerable. They can't have it, to use Melanie's words. It must be erased. Why? Because Jewish victims, Jewish suffering, Jewish peoplehood returning to our ancient homeland, all of that is a living embodiment, a living reminder of the authenticity of a biblical narrative. The Jewish people are not just a nation. The Jewish people still alive today after thousands of years, returning to our homeland as the only ancient people to go into exile and return to our homeland is a fulfillment of such an outrageous prophecy in the Bible, the most repeated prophecy in the Bible. And it's such a departure from the rest of history, from the rest of the history of nations. It's so impossible and, dare I say, miraculous that they can't have it, because it would be proof, or the closest thing to proof, it would be an affirmation, I should say, that the God of the Bible is real and active in history. They would have explaining to do. If you accept that the Jewish people have returned to their homeland after thousands of years scattered in exile, that the Jews of today are, oh my gosh, the Jews have returned. What do you do if you despise the Bible? And for people whose worldview depends on the God of the Bible not being sovereign, on the narrative of the Bible being false, on biblical civilization being dismantled, then the Jewish people in our homeland are the ultimate refutation, the ultimate challenge to everything they believe. That's why Israel isn't treated like other countries. That's why that's why you start to hear things today like the Jews aren't really the Jews. That's why you hear this. They can't have the Jews returning to our homeland. What do they do with that? The fulfillment of prophecy is a terrifying concept to these people. And that's why this conflict isn't treated like other conflicts. You see, if you reject the Bible, you reject a sovereign God, you reject that whole narrative, then Israel today isn't the Jews after 2,000 years of exile returning to their land. It's just a bunch of people coming in and colonizing land that belong to these, these Arabs who they call Palestinians. That's what it is. Because if history starts 100 years ago or 50 years ago, you can run with that narrative. So our enemies, both the Marxists and the Islamists, know that this is a threat to them, that the existence of the state of Israel, the existence of the ascendancy of a Jewish nation in the state of Israel is offensive to them. It's worse than offensive. It's a challenge to their entire worldview. So what do we do with all of this? So I think the first thing we have to do is stop being surprised, stop being confused. Once you understand the framework, once you see that this alliance between the progressive left and the Islamists is not accidental, it actually makes sense. There's an internal logic to it. Stop laughing at Queers for Palestine. There's an internal logic. Their behavior actually makes sense. And when things make sense, you can respond to them intelligently. The second thing is that we, both Jews and Christians, need to recognize that we are in this together. Our enemies already know that. They attack Christmas markets and Easter masses in the name of their hatred of Israel and their support for Gaza, right? They disrupt church services and synagogue prayer events with the same slogans. They see us as one civilization, as one group. And it's time that we started seeing it that way too. Melanie Phillips is one of the clearest voices out there on what's happening. I encourage you to follow her work. I try to catch as much of her work as I can. But I also want you to understand that what she's describing is not just a psychological phenomenon. It's not just a cope. This is an ideological partnership. It's an ideological comfort and cooperation that they have with each other. And once we understand it that way, we can start understanding it. And that's what we're going to keep working on together on this channel. As always, if you found this useful, please share it. And we'll see each other in the next video.